Representative Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Whitting, and the rest of the panel. I found this very informative. I have a question. It probably has three components, if you don't mind. I wondered if you could give me and us a little bit more information about the classroom diagnostic tools and the voluntary model curriculum, and then how many times a student can actually retest, what the cost of that is to a district. Is there a cost to them? And the last one, and I know others probably have questions, is the completion of a project in lieu of the test, is that something that's solely developed by the local education agency, or is that something that the state has a standard for?
Sure. The classroom diagnostic tools are provided free to districts. It's an online diagnostic assessment that teachers can use multiple times during the year to track progress of their students. As I said earlier, they get immediate feedback and links to instructional supports for each of the diagnostic areas that are assessed.
So if I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt you a minute. So if a child is lacking in proficiency in reading, let's say, and that not knowing what is in this diagnostic tool, is that child then going to receive some remedial instruction in reading to become more, to help that child be more proficient in reading through this diagnostic tool and the instruction? So
it's actually within reading, it would point out within the categories that are assessed within reading where the areas of strength and need are. And yes, the intent is then the teacher working with the student look at their data and form a plan moving forward.
Okay. And how many times would a student be permitted to retest?
On the diagnostic
yes,
tool?
If they
That's a local decision. Up to 5 times a year is what maximum we recommend, that you provide enough time for instruction between assessments so it would have an impact. So it's a local decision.
So if a child repeatedly takes or goes through this diagnostic tool and still is not proficient, is then when the administrator would step in and say, we've done all we can, we're going to give a waiver, or then we're going to look at the completion of a project? Would that be solely up to the administrator?
Right. The waiver is not related to the diagnostic tool. It's related to the Keystone exam.
And I'm saying, right, if they can't pass the Keystone exam, and they've gone through all of the
supplemental instruction, and they would have to have met all other local requirements, and then the decision about the waiver is a local decision.
And in terms of retesting, Chapter 4 requires 2 attempts at a Keystone exam before a student could enter the project-based assessment, with supplemental instruction being provided to the student between those 2 administrations of the exam.
And that is actual instruction. It's not just a student sitting in front of a computer. It's a interaction with a teacher.
The completion of satisfactory supplemental instruction is designed by the district and is at the discretion of the school district.
So it can be just the student sitting in front of a computer instead of an instructor?
It's a local decision via Chapter 4.
So I'm assuming that is yes. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Rapp.
Thank you, Chairman Saylor. Gentlemen, I just want you to say that I found your testimony very refreshing and very honest. And you can mark this down. Representative Rapp agreed with PSCA.
We'll let our friends across the street know.
Truly, I am very concerned. I agree with you. With every new administration, I've myself gone through school. I have children. I have grandchildren. Every time there's a new administration in Washington or in Harrisburg, there's a new initiative. And instead of children needing that consistency. And I also agree with you about the remediation. I had a meeting with other area legislators with our IU6 directors just a very short while ago. One of their concerns was the cost of this remedial. And students, they're very concerned. As a matter of fact, where I live, we have a higher ed council because we do not have a community college, but they are in place of a community college. One thing that they are seeing, and these are students with IEPs, remember, where decisions are supposed to be made at the local level, and they are seeing our high ed council because they do GED for students who have dropped out. What they are seeing are students in special education dropping out because they cannot do the math. They don't believe that they can pass these keystones. The school districts are not telling them that they can graduate through their IEP or through a project. And so our higher education, or our high ed council, is seeing an increase in the number of special education students dropping out and willing, motivated enough to study for a GED when they're supposed to have all the supports they need in special education. I believe that when PDE testified, or the state board, that really they alluded to that the department gives all these resources to local districts and for remediation, and you're saying that there's a huge cost. That's what I found in discussing with our directors at IU6. Just curious, you saying that your school district was having to hire 2 more teachers. Are those teachers to do instruction, or is your particular school district just using the computer system for students who are already struggling? Not all students are going to learn from something online or sitting in front of a computer without an instructor.
Representative Rapp, thank you for the question. Yes, the design is for those 2 new teachers solely to be for face-to-face remediation instruction.
Thank you, because I see that as a real failure when school districts have that belief, and for whatever reason, if there's a lack of resources, that you can actually remediate a student by just placing them in front of a computer. Mm-hmm. I don't think that works. So I truly do appreciate the honesty in your testimony, and I wholeheartedly agree. I've been very concerned about this increasing the dropout rate, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hill. Representative Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the panel for being here. I know you brought up a lot of information that's maybe sounds, out of a lot of our realm. But I do know that parents are extremely concerned, across the nation. I've seen some Facebook postings of some, tests and on different subjects and things that are being asked of our students. Certainly I am really not aware certainly as much as you are. I'm certainly willing to sit down and talk with you further. But I know that the content and parents' rights are extremely important to parents across this state, whether it's the right to privacy or viewing tests or having access to textbooks, curriculum, or what children are being tested on. So I appreciate you bringing this information to our attention. Unfortunately, I don't believe that we have the time to really go into the depth that you were prepared to do today. But thank you for your testimony.
Well, I do want to state that we are really very willing to sit down and share the information that we had found. My saying that this is a unique national ID are not my words. That it was a womb-to-workplace data system are not my words. That we are violating privacy is something that we can prove. And we are very willing to sit down and explain, if you want to have legislative breakfast, whatever it takes, because the children are the most important part here.
Exactly.
And our families are the most important part. And I believe that if the parents really understood this information that was flowing to the federal government, I think you would believe that all hell is going to break loose.
That may possibly be. I have been reminded regarding Common Core. I was around doing outcome-based education, and to me, it's just a remake of outcome-based education. I was on a panel back in my district, a strategic plan, and it has reminded me of everything that was proposed in outcome-based education. So thank you.
Representative Rack, thank you for this opportunity. Because you're a special ed, I just want to say one other thing. I was leading up to this, and I apologize I didn't get there fast enough. We were part of the beta testing for the website on the portal to get public input. There are parents in our audience today that participated in that. It was poorly worded for public scrutiny. I went to Sarah Demarest with the problems, suggested we would help them put together a consumer-based website so the public could give input. Unfortunately, that never happened. So I wanted you to know to the level we're willing to cooperate. We were willing to help with that website, even with the beta testing, but unfortunately it was not structured correctly. So thank you.
Of Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. And I wanted to ask you, too, about the project-based assessment. My one child went through a career and technical center, and he had to do a project. He was welding. So I was going to ask if that could possibly be considered as one of those projects since they're going through a career and technical. And the other thing I wanted to ask, are your students exhibiting any type of apprehension, knowing that this is coming, that regardless of all the years they spent in career and tech and they're proficient, and some of them, go to states, go to nationals, through career and tech, but they can't pass the Keystone exam. So when you make the statement that the Keystone exams used as a graduation requirement ensures standardization and denies the student the right to choose his or her path in life. I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. So welcome your comments.
And please make it clear, we're not against accountability by any sense of the imagination.
And neither am I.
But the question you had about whether a welding project could be used for that project-based assessment, my understanding is no. It has to be in biology, English literature, or Algebra 1. That's why we're a little unclear as to what a project-based assessment will look like in those areas. But we think there are multiple ways to show proficiency in multiple areas. The passing of NOCTI exams requires a keen ability to read and understand technical journals that should be looked at as achieving proficiency on a reading assessment. It's not looked at that way. PD has looked at it strongly enough to be able to include NOCTI exams and your performance on NOCTI exams on the SPP, but not towards proficiency on a Keystone. So again, getting a range of advice and suggestion and no clear guidance.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you going a little bit more in depth to these project-based assessments. I guess I didn't realize the whole involvement when they were first mentioned by the state board. It just seemed kind of, a project that you had to do. But the way you've outlined this, it's very much in depth. Can you kind of give me kind of an example of what a child would have to do for a project-based assessment? What exactly is involved?
Well, there's a test prep. I mean, I could repeat some of the statistics that were provided by my assistant superintendent, Owen J. Roberts. But basically, there's a test prep, and then there's hours sitting in front of the computer to perform the test, and there's monitoring for it. So if the student, and I think I gave the worst case example, if the student has to do this for all three courses, minimally is going to sit in front of the computer for 10 hours each.
So
but you don't want to just throw a child in front of the computer that's failed.
Exactly.
You've got to devote time and energy from the professional staff to get that child ready.
Especially if the child is not proficient in reading.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
And that was my point. I don't know if you were here when I asked the question before, how do we expect children to learn by just sitting them in front of a computer without actual instruction from a teacher actually being there? So they're actually, instead of passing the test on paper, you're just expecting them to read a lot of information and then do the same thing on the computer? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, pretty much. It's not, it's not getting to the nub of the problem.
No, it doesn't appear. Thank you very much.